Hey folks, MasakoX here, and welcome to the 500,000 subscribers special. You know, it's actually quite a momentous occasion, really. It's a big deal. Never really thought I'd make it here, Nah, this isn't right. I can't just do the same format for this. This is a big deal. Wait one moment, folks. I'm gonna go somewhere. I think we need a different setting.
I didn't know where I was supposed to go. Trying to find the perfect setting for this momentous occasion was an arduous task. It took me to all the corners of the world. Well, as best as I can do given the current global circumstances. But in the end, I was able to find somewhere after many, many days of rendering. It was a very weird place. It looked very secluded, very cozy. But I felt like I was home. So I did what I did best, sat myself down and began to talk.
So for the purposes of this special occasion, I thought that we might look backward to the very start of the Dragon Ball world that we're all familiar with. The time of planet Vegeta, Bardock, Gine, Frieza, and the home of the Saiyans being utterly decimated. But then Haverok and I reckoned, nah, that's far too overdone. Let's take this back even further. After we got our initial pitch from the user Firebrand128, supposing the notion of Bardock and Gine's youth. So, for your viewing pleasure, alongside the further assistance of our friend Meg720, the author of the novelization of the Gine What If, we present to you Dragon Ball minus 1. Do you get it? The allusion to Dragon Ball minus? Well, I can assure you that the number may be lower, but the quality will be higher. For this, we're going to go way back to the times when Saiyans weren't even on planet Vegeta, that fabled ship that carried them across the stars. Let's begin. We start out in the cold vacuum of space, aboard a ship that is much rustier and spikier than the usual Cold Force vessel that we've grown so accustomed to. It's not as round and smooth as the means of transportation that we know from the main universe. This goes much further back in time. A young and spirited Prince Cold is slowly walking towards the bridge. While he is towering above most of the soldiers present, he doesn't feel like he is a beacon of total power. At least not completely. Not yet. The place of honor on the bridge is occupied by a hoverpod, similar to Frieza's, but a little bit more primitive. The hum of the motors much more coarse than in the future, less efficient, but the end result much the same. It clearly serves other purposes aside from transportation, since various pipes and buttons are connected to a breathing mask worn by the individual situated in said pod. It's a mobile life support system, but the creature using it looks as sharp as ever. Despite their body failing them, their mind is still in peak condition. It is an older member of Cold's race, presently in their first form, yet, weirdly enough, has 2 pairs of horns instead of the typical singular set. One pair shorter and completely white, and the other pair proper, the more traditional set of antlers, just like Frieza's. The being had piercing red eyes, and most of its face was covered with the breathing mask.
You called me, father?
Cold tries to hide the annoyance in his voice. The voice that responds is raspy and sharp, though the mask seems to be slightly distorting it.
Play me the message again. You are fully capable of playing it yourself.
Play the message, boy.
Cold rolled his eyes and pressed the communications button. It displayed an image of a spiky-haired male individual wearing a weird mixture of robes and animal skin. The man also seemed to have a tail that was resting around his waist, as well as a big scar going through one of his eyes that seemingly had been made redundant for many a year. The being had a gruff voice, but Cold noticed that it does everything it can to look more refined than it actually was, almost as if it were presenting.
To the most Wondrous and resplendent Emperor Glacier.
The transmission starts.
I am King Vegeta II, the leader of the now united Saiyan race. I heard tales about your conquests and your glory. My people are a race of mighty warriors that also dream of battle and...
The creature paused for a moment, as if the directions he was given were confusing. Clearly, this monkey was following a script. Glacier gave a cackle of satisfaction. If this was the smartest example of these Saiyans going, then the rest should be no trouble at all. Cold also found that little tidbit amusing. Every time he watched it back, he would play it on repeat for many days afterwards.
We, the Saiyans, share our planet plant with another species called the Tuffles, but they are not interested in fair and honorable combat. Instead, they cower behind their technological armaments, instead of using their innate strength to undermine what it means for us to be who we are. It sickens us to the core. I'm afraid that our very existence may be in peril. If we don't stand against them and remind them to never underestimate us again, just because we stand proud without needing fancy metal things to fight our battles for us. We thought our position was hopeless, but then we heard of legends about you.
Glacier's gaze was as cold as ice itself throughout all of this. He didn't even fidget, while Cold seemed to be having the time of his life hearing all about this. He was jubilant at the fortitude of these Saiyans.
We think that you could use a race of powerful warriors such as ourselves in your empire. If you aid us against our neighbors, I will pledge an allegiance to you as your vassal. I hope you will consider my offer.
The Saiyan bowed politely, but Cold could clearly hear,
"How do you turn off this blasted thing?"
in the background before the message properly terminated.
You are not laughing, Father. I personally find it adorable that these apes have managed to band together to learn such relatively eloquent verbiage for our amusement.
Glacier turned to his son with minimal gusto.
Indeed, I have heard stories about them. Durable, not very smart, adaptable and capable of fighting from a young age.
Yet you remain unconvinced.
Cold raised his eyebrow.
You don't get it, Cold. Give an ape a fish, and it will come back for more. Give an ape a fishing rod, and it will stab you through the heart with it.
Cold recoiled at this. Once again, his father was not looking at the bigger picture, and instead wallowing in his very set ways.
I think it's a pretty good deal, Father. We could dabble in this venture a little. Perhaps give them some basic weaponry and transportation. Maybe a few of those nursing capsules that are going spare.
Nursing capsules?
Spluttered Glacier.
Whatever for?
I heard they still breed like animals. Pregnancy, they call it. How antiquated, and in fact rather demeaning for the carrier.
What's your point?
My point is, Father, that if we help these Saiyans, we could find ourselves in the black quite handsomely. Put simply, it's free real estate.
Glacier was still not enamored with this plan.
That was always a problem, child. Deals. You always have to make a deal. You don't make deals with lesser life forms. You break them. A populace hopped up with the idea of a partnership will always find a way to stab you in the back in the end.
Cold sensed weakness and pounced on it.
Don't tell me that you are afraid of some apes, Father.
This was when Glacier's might broke cover. A thin, small, but yet strong hand grabbed Cold's neck. A roar came from the mask, much bolder than what had gone previously.
If you weren't my son, I would have struck you down for insubordination. Don't you get it? One rebellion is like a ripple in a calm lake. I do not want any ripples in my lake.
When he let go of his son's throat, Glacier allowed himself to smile.
But you might be right this time. After all, neither I nor your brother Ice have to be worried about these Saiyans. If they by any chance do something nefarious, it won't be my problem. You can deal with them. Understood?
Yes, Father.
Cold was still subtly massaging his throat, not trying to bring attention to the fact that his father's grasp had hurt him so.
And remember, my boy, this endeavor is not a test for your succession. I will never allow you to ruin my empire.
Cold just nodded and made his way to leave.
And Cold, one more thing. While I may seem decrepit and broken, do not think for 1 second you can get one over on me. I still have the power to crush you into the dust.
And so, the glacier force indeed helped the Saiyans on planet Plant to subjugate the Tupples. The very few who managed to survive were forced to work under King Vegeta's boot as their scientific division, and their descendants, mired with Saiyan blood, would do the same. They were also bequeathed fancy new technology, including early examples of scouters, those scout scopes, nursing capsules of course, and transportation pods. Though, unlike the original, these were only used by the Saiyan elite, and sometimes mid-class Saiyans at the former's discretion. Over the years that followed, it was important for every Saiyan to show their usefulness, not only to their king, but to their new overlords and benefactors. The reactions on the planet were mixed. On one hand, most of the Saiyans enjoyed having full control over their homeworld, now named Planet Vegeta, in honor of their king. But on the other hand, the reliance on another, more powerful empire made some of the Saiyans feel like this victory was unearned, hollow, undeserved. Kiru, a mid-class warrior, did not have time to think about politics, however. She was quite the angry soul, always filled with some sort of resentment and scorn, and her latest bout of rage stemmed from those blasted nursing capsules. She wasn't angry at them per se, but by the fact that they weren't offered to Saiyans at the time when she was pregnant with her daughter, Gine. She hated being pregnant, being unable to train, enjoying the thing she loved doing the most. This baby inside of her was a dead weight, lumbering, swollen, useless. Great. What made the experience even worse was that her offspring wasn't as strong as she had hoped. Due to her many triumphs and impressive resume, she had been given a scout scope of her own, which allowed her to realize immediately that her child was not going to be as formidable as she. She resented Gine for this, but did not take her frustrations out on the infant directly. Instead, she plowed it straight into training, and at least making herself strong if her babe was not going to be strong. However, an opportunity for this to not matter arose not that long ago, not long after her birth. A new way of conquering had been proposed by the Glacier Empire that tickled her fancy. By sending young Saiyans out who were relatively weak or had yet to grasp their full potential, could subjugate weaker worlds when their latent powers rose to the fore, in the fullness of time. It was far more efficient than sending out the usual flock. By the time Gine was born, it had become somewhat of a standard procedure. But when Kiru examined the eligibility criteria, she was once again derailed. Sadly, Gine was too weak even for this. In most scenarios, she would most likely die in the field. When it came down to it, Kiru had to put everything in perspective. She was still young. She could still fight, maybe even get promoted to the elite ranks if the stars were to align in the right manner. And the elites were feeling a bit frisky. So she, for the sake of her own promotion, just abandoned her daughter, left her to fend for herself and perhaps find some work in menial jobs someday in the future, perhaps as a cook for the warriors. She knew of kids who would end up in those types of fields, and even though it wasn't befitting for Saiyans in the long run to be cooks, it was honest work. It was a necessary role in their society. So, in Kiru's mind, this abandonment wasn't cruelty. It was an act of mercy. She didn't want Gine to die, but she couldn't bear to see her stumble before her anymore. And so, despite being the smallest, Gine was quickly able to adapt to this new lifestyle and take leadership over her group of meat scavengers. What Kiru hadn't taken into account, though, was the fact that Gine was smart. She was weak physically, but when it came to her noodle, she was pretty skilled. She was the smartest of these scroungers, which resulted in her becoming the go-to leader of the pack. They admired her knowledge and survival skills. They ate well under her. With their stomachs satiated, these kids quickly became a curious bunch. Gine and her friends were particularly interested in checking out these new Saiyan pods. Apparently, they were even faster than the older models, far more comfortable and far more plentiful. Even now, the low to mid-class warriors were able to use them at their own leisure. "I heard that they sent kids like us to conquer planets," said Turles, one of the kids in the group. Gine shook her head and shuddered. The thought of conquering a planet was a bit overwhelming for her. But in her quite short life, she'd learnt that adult life was mostly about fighting and very little else. In the time she had spent as the pack leader, and even before then with her mother, she was seen as an anomaly, a Saiyan who was kind. A Saiyan who would look out for her friends, regardless of their battle power or overall usefulness. The kids, down on their lot, appreciated this more than anyone else ever could, since they weren't suffering. This new generation of Saiyans saw Gine as a beacon of hope in their otherwise somber existence. This respect she had garnered gave her confidence. Confidence she never had with her mother. Kiru despised Gine's empathy and good nature. This wasn't how Saiyans were supposed to act. It was yet another reason why she viewed her daughter as a failure. Not only was Gine weak, but she was soft. Soft and weak. That wouldn't do. Kiru had no time for such things, and whenever Gine would act kindly to her mother, she would be rebuked heavily. But Gine just kept on being nice. She couldn't be anything else. It was her nature through and through, much like how her mother's nature for conquest was through and through. The mini-squad walked closer to the pods. The one tasked with looking after said pods was a mechanic named Pinter. While not a warrior himself, Pinter was a pretty talented craftsman and was lucky to have sired a son whose potential was enough to bestow him and his family the status of being mid-class Saiyans. Said son had displayed considerable success at fighting despite his relative young age. Right now, he was enjoying some time off missions and spent his time helping his father out in guarding the pods.
I'm telling you, Bardock, this technology, it's amazing. It's the future of the Saiyan race, you mark my words. You don't realize how lucky your generation has it. Battling has never been easier.
Bardock nodded. He was a child of few words, but he enjoyed his father's company. And while Pinter was busy, he spotted some small shapes sneaking into one of the hangars. He decided to check it out. I mean, there wasn't much else going on. But, to his surprise, he saw not exactly criminals, but a bunch of scrappy-looking kids. Most likely, the wandering bunch of misfits that had been gaining a reputation lately.
Hey you! Get lost! This doesn't belong to you!
Sure enough, the children scattered like wild animals. Having scared them away, Bardock was about to walk back outside, but then he spotted a small girl hiding behind one of the piles of crates.
That goes for you too, Short Stack. Beat it!
Sorry, said Gine. I just wanted to see a pod up close.
Yeah, well, now you have. Now get! Bardock narrowed his eyes.
Gine walked out of the cover of the crates and looked up at Bardock, her eyes wide with both fear and timidity. You have nice armor. Bardock blushed a bit, but he tried to hide it. He was one of the very few mid-class youngsters who had managed to earn this brand new Saiyan armor.
Don't change the subject! I told you to get lost.
But Gine didn't move. She didn't feel scared of Bardock for some reason. She kept on with her interrogation. Are you a warrior? Have you piloted one of these before?
You don't pilot them. They take you to a destination. You do your job and then they take you back. Well, that is if you survived.
Gine's eyes sparkled. Whoa, that sounds awesome. Bardock regained his composure.
Listen, you need to get out of here, now. or else we'll both get it in the neck.
Can I come see it again? Maybe some other time? Bardock looked at her, standing up to him despite her tiny frame, half his size. This girl had gumption.
Sure, come alone next time, and knock. I don't like it when you kids sneak up on us.
Oh, all right. And then she left without question. Huh. Pinto seemed pretty confused when Bardock exited the hangar.
What was that all about, son? Ah, nothing. Just that pack of mongrel kids roaming about. Nothing to write home about, father. The oldest Saiyan laughed. Oh, they're not all that bad. I don't blame them for wanting to take a gander. All of us non-warriors are pretty envious, you know. We would all love to fly one of those someday.
Bardock looked at his dad for a moment.
Come now, they wouldn't be able to get off the ground if it weren't for you and your trusty tools. That's kind of you to say, son. Now, we should probably get some rest. The prince and his squadron will be expecting you to be at your best peak physical condition. I mean, it's not every day that a mid-class warrior gets drafted into the royal escort. I got time.
And yes, that was indeed true. Bardock still had a few weeks before his secondment with Prince Vegeta and his trusted advisor Paragus to a mission in the farther reaches of the galaxy. But he still wanted to help his father whenever and wherever he could. So the next day, Bardock was tinkering with some devices related to a pod's thrusters when Gine walked up to him and bade him hello. Hey, I came alone this time. Bardock eyed her up.
Good. You follow direction. Father's not here, so come on in.
He motioned to Gine to go inside, and she skipped off to go and look at the pod, now not having to worry about any punishment befalling her. She walked around the pod, touched every part of it, and even got inside one to see how comfortable the seat was. It was very comfortable, the most comfy thing she'd sat on in her life. Bardock smiled, seeing Gine's pleasure at such small things that he'd grown bored of. This was nothing new, but to her, this was amazing. So otherworldly. This splendor rubbed off on Bardock, actually. He once again recalled the time he clapped eyes on one of these pods for the first time and was just as blown away as Gine was right now. This girl, she was so different to the others. She had a sense of wonder, devoid from other Saiyans that he'd met. She didn't seek power or anything like that. She just loved being in his company and learning things. That's interesting. After more of these visits occurred, it became clear to Bardock that Gine's intrigue in the pod was purely curiosity, nothing nefarious or underhanded. She just really found these pods cool. So after careful consideration, he granted her the access code to the hangar.
Here, with this code, you can go inside on your own and look at the pod, even when I'm not there. Just promise me that you'll still come alone. No bringing your friends. This code is strictly your eyes only.
I promise. She held the piece of paper with great care and treated this like the biggest badge of honor going. She kept her word and was very careful when she visited, sitting in the pod alone for many hours, even taking the occasional nap. She even came to say goodbye to Bardock when he left for his big mission. Things looked good. However, the Saiyans were blissfully unaware of a threat looming over their heads and was about to manifest itself. One day, the capital ship of the Glacier Force headed for planet Vegeta. At the same time, a mass message calling all Saiyans not on important missions to return to their homeworld immediately and await further instructions. There supposedly was meant to be an announcement to be heard that would impact their long-term future. The very same day, Cold was called to the bridge by his father.
Read this,
said the Emperor, without even properly welcoming his son or even looking at him, just tossing this book at him. His father was referring to an old book, an anachronistic medium? How crude. It was called The Book of Namek. Cold wasn't aware that the slugs even knew how to write, let alone document it in such a massive tome. After going through the marked chapter, he looked at Glacier in disbelief.
You are on about this prophecy again? Father, this is preposterous. It's just a silly fairy tale. Yeah, as long as they believe it, it is and shall continue to be a problem. They've started to breed faster than you anticipated, Cold. They are adapting faster than you anticipated, Cold. and they are far too successful for their own good. I have no alternative.
But to eradicate them, this is not good for business, Father.
Not total eradication, boy. Merely break their spirits and purge their numbers. This is but a correction. You failed to deal with them how I wanted you to deal with them, so let me fix your mistakes. Again.
Cold was disgusted. It wasn't like he cared about the Saiyans, but he certainly didn't want them expunged. Not like this. They were useful. They paid their dues. They were efficient and had contributed richly to the coffers of the Empire. This act of Glacier wasn't ruling. This was paranoia getting the better of him. The old man had gone mad, clearly. And so, Glacier hovered above the planet. But instead of a singular death ball, much like his grandson did in the original, he and his ships created many smaller balls of energy. The cascade of blasts rained down on the surface and eradicated everyone who was on it, starting with the royal palace. Planet Vegeta was, much like how before Cold had bestowed them with tech, an uninhabitable husk. No life signs of life detected, my lord!
Excellent. If anyone asks, tell them that we had come to warn them about an incoming meteor, but we arrived too late to destroy it. It remains carpet bombing the surface. Now call the survivors. I believe we are in possession of a much more controllable race.
Far away, Vegeta III, our King Vegeta, was shocked to hear the message.
Our people decimated.
Paragus looked on in horror. The same was true for his men and younger warriors, with Nappa and Bardock amongst them.
My liege, we have to go back and salvage what's left.
Of course, when the survivors returned, Prince Cold was there to offer his own personal condolences. Prince Vegeta knew that they weren't genuine acts of sorrow, but at this point, he didn't know how many Saiyans remained. 100? A few hundred? It looked pretty grim. And he was the one in charge now. He ordered his subordinates to gather all the remaining functional equipment on the planet that they had access to and to consolidate. Right now, their future was completely tied to the Glacier Force. This purge had sent them back decades. Bardock used this opportunity to check on his father's hangar. He didn't even find a body. Miraculously, some of the pods had survived the onslaught. It seemed that Pinter did everything he could to make them as durable as possible. He found one of his father's old red jumpsuits. He wanted to have some sort of memento to his father, so he tore a piece of it off and made it into his signature bandana, a permanent tribute to his father who never got to travel the stars. With this gesture, he would, or at least a part of him would. Before he left, he noticed that one of the still-standing hangars was open, and one of the pods was missing. Meanwhile, on a remote planet near a mountain range, a middle-aged man named Gohan found something that he thought to be a meteorite. The object in question was a spherical object that had made quite an impact in the ground. Inside, there was a little girl, still sleeping. How could a girl sleep through a massive crash like this? Gohan slowly approached the vessel and opened it. Gine slowly woke up and looked at the man. The two stared at each other for a moment, not aware how much this encounter would ultimately change both of their lives. At first, and understandably so, Gine looked warily at the older man that had found her. While timid for the standards of her race, she was ready to strike if he tried anything funny. She was still a Saiyan after all.
Well, well, how did you wind up here, little one?
Gine growled a bit, like a scared animal. The man understandably stepped back, but maintained the gentle look in his eyes.
You must be scared and hungry. Here, I have some apples. Take one, he said,
Leaving a fruit at the entrance to the open pod. Gine was still nervous. This could be a trap. But the truth was, she hadn't eaten for a while, nor did she fully understand what had happened recently. It was all a mess. She decided to take the strange red fruit and quickly realized that it was rather tasty. Not harmful at all. Very sweet, in fact.
Do you like it?
Gine chomped it down voraciously and nodded with a beaming grin.
Excellent. My name's Gohan. What's yours?
As she stopped munching on the apple, she looked at him. Gine?
This is your name?
She nodded, and the older man decided that there was no point in pushing her for an answer about her parentage. At least not now. The girl had seemingly been through a lot, if she was so bowled over at the sight of a mere humble apple. He remained with her for several hours, talking and trying to calm her down. Finally, he managed to get enough of her trust for her to exit the pod and walk up to him. He was rather puzzled by her tail, because other than that, she looked human. He wasn't scared though. Plenty of things were quite unusual in this world. I mean, their king is a dog, and dinosaurs roam the plains. Gohan decided to take her to his house, giving her a place to stay for at least a few days until she would open up enough to tell him about her missing parents. Clearly, they must be worried sick. She soon started to accept his company, and on the third day she exclaimed, "My parents are gone. Long gone." Gohan was surprised by this sudden statement, as this didn't come out as something that Gine was particularly depressed about. It was merely stating a fact.
I see. Well, do you have any other family?
She shook her head. The older man pondered for a while. He had long passed his prime, but he could still take care of himself pretty well, especially with no other distractions. And this little creature needed someone who could help her adapt to life in this land.
Tell you what, if you don't have anywhere else to stay, you can live here with me, Gine. Would you like that?
Gine reluctantly nodded, but then smiled, grateful for some sort of stability. And thusly, she was adopted by Gohan. It took some time for her to open up fully, but only a few months later, she was calling Gohan Gramps. She'd also become more talkative, though never ever referred to anything prior to their first meeting. She was curious, a very passionate soul, wanting to know everything about this planet and environment that she now called home. Just like that, this child had closed a chapter in her life and started a new one. One of the most impressive things about her was the feats that she was capable of. She was in fact capable of learning martial arts. She had the knack for it, and she was quite good at it too. Gohan also decided to homeschool her, instead of just letting her live here with no obligations or no education. He taught her how to read and even got her some basic maths books from a remote town for the times when he wanted to get some groceries. One day, however, Gine had a terrible nightmare. After many minutes writhing in her sleep, she woke up covered in blankets by Grandpa Gohan, who had both been scared and injured. "Grampy, I had such a terrible dream. What happened?" For a moment, she looked at his face, trying to calm down.
We were attacked by a monster, Gine. But it's all right. It's gone.
She didn't like this explanation very much, but Gramps was able to lull her back to sleep eventually. Also, after this event, for some bizarre and unexplored reason, Gohan decided to get better curtains for the windows. And while he was never strict and forbade her to do much stuff, she wasn't allowed to walk outside in the full moon. That was it. That's when the monster would return, he explained. One of the more mysterious aspects of living with Gohan had been the 4-star Dragon Ball that sat on the shelf. Gramps tended to tell Gine many weird stories about this object, suggesting that there might be more of them and that it apparently has magic powers. And it seems like Gohan's duty is to guard this orb from nasty, selfish people. Gine did not have very strong opinions on any other beings, as she rarely saw anyone who wasn't her adopted grandfather. One day, that all changed, as a weird, middle-aged man suddenly appeared, when she and her grandfather were just gathering firewood elsewhere. He had waited outside patiently, awaiting the occupant's return.
"Excuse me, I know this might sound weird to you, but I'm looking for objects called Dragon Balls."
Gohan looked at the man in a rather mistrustful manner.
"Why are you pursuing these objects? Oh, where are my manners? My name is Brief, and I am a scientist. And to be quite honest, I've always wanted to research these mythical objects. You know, apparently they can grant wishes if you believe in that sort of thing."
Gine blinked twice. "Grant wishes? Grandpa, you never told me that they can grant..." "Oh." Gohan smiled at her. "It's all right, little one."
"So, Dr. Briefs, was it?"
The scientist nodded.
do you really want to learn the secrets of the Dragon Balls? Oh, I would love to. See, I'm quite a successful scientist myself, and there are very few things I've done. Wait! What are you doing? Dr. Briefs got pretty confused as Grandpa Gohan stood before him, battle-ready in a fighting stance. Well, if you want to get our Dragon Ball, you will have to earn it. Emperor Glacier was looking upon the map of his empire. Although his expansion was going at a steady pace, he still wasn't satisfied. And although he was looking quite decrepit these days, he knew that his sons still weren't ready to take over him. He had to keep going. Ice was showing some promise, but he was more interested in the military side of things. Cold, though.
You wanted to see me, Father?
Prince Cold slowly entered the observation deck of his vessel.
I was looking through your territories. Why are some of the planets not completely annexed to the Empire?
Cold stood proud and explained.
I use them to their fullest, so we can profit from their existence. Sell them to refugees or businesses. I do not see any need of controlling the populace myself. That would be inefficient, when I can easily, much more easily, control their economy. What? And act like a traveling salesman? Haven't I taught you anything, boy? You do not deal with lesser people. You do not give them a platform to feel that they are in any way equal to you. And this is precisely, even after all these years, you're still not ready. At this rate, I will die in this very chair.
Cold decided to not let this slide this time.
If you are so determined to keep the throne from me, why not just allow Ice to take over and be done with it, if he's so perfect in your eyes?
The Emperor glared at his side, but said nothing. He wanted to silence him for his impertinence, but at least he managed to have some sort of effect on his progeny.
So, you've started to develop a spine. All right. How was your meeting with Vegeta III?
Glacier decided to change the subject, acting like the previous spat never happened.
Our Saiyan invasion force are pretty scattered, but they still bring home the bacon. According to the last estimations, you will be in the possession of 3 new planets in the coming week. See? I told you that reduction would work miracles. And Prince Vegeta is way easier to control than his parents.
There was a bit of triumph in how Glacier worded that sentence.
We could have had many more planets handed over to us without that reduction of yours. True, yes, true. Whilst also holding back a possible rebellion. Then they'd all have to be slaughtered. Do you have any idea how many resources we would have to use to crush something as ridiculous as an uprising? I'm pretty sure you're an expert on that, Father. Watch your clever mouth, Cold. I've allowed your mewling to slide once today, but don't try your luck.
Cold bowed slightly, visibly irritated.
One day, either you or Ice will thank me for all of that I've taught you about ruling our empire. Transactions are not how we do things, son. We do not give anything. We take everything. And they need to be fully aware of that.
But Cold wasn't listening. He was getting really tired of that old point of view, and hoped that one day that breathing mask of Glacier's would malfunction, with or without his help. Brief was absolutely stunned.
I'm sorry, I'm not a warrior. I cannot fight. Oh! What's the glasses?
Yelled the scientist, trying to avoid Gohan's attacks.
Then how do you plan to protect the Dragon Balls from evil people? I just want to gather them for scientific Oh! These objects can be very dangerous if they get in the wrong hands. What will you do then?
Brief looked at him, puzzled.
Wrong hands? Listen, I don't know what you mean. Listen, those superstitions clearly aren't real.
Are they? Gohan scoffed and prepared to launch another attack.
Grant, stop! He's scared! Like, really scared!
Gohan smiled. Oh, I know, little one. I meant to scare him. If I can do that, think about all the other evil people out there. They could easily take the Dragon Ball from him. Besides, he wouldn't know how to find the other ones. Oh, I have one with me already. Brief reluctantly put a hand in his handbag, and after a short while, he was able to show both Gine and Gohan a 2-star Dragon Ball. This really is. Gohan seemed pretty surprised.
I found it as a young man. on my first date with my wife. It got washed up on the shore. We thought it was a giant pearl, but no. Took me many years to realize what it really was. But finding the rest will be easy. I built a special device that would allow me to locate the other ones lickety-split, based on their energy signature. Gohan blinked twice. You did what? I built a radar. It shows where the others are. Grandpa Gohan suddenly blanched. You can just track them with your blasted technology. Is that a problem? Gohan sighed. Listen, you are completely unprepared for such a journey. It's only you and your van. Do you know how dangerous it will be trying to find the other Dragon Balls? Gine looked at the other two men and poked Gohan.
Maybe we can help him.
Grandpa Gohan looked back at the child. For a moment he pondered something and looked at her tail. Maybe the Dragon Balls could be their solution, to free her of her curse.
All right, I will give you my Dragon Ball, but only if you agree that we accompany you as your bodyguards.
Of course. The more the merrier. But an old man and a small girl?
But Brief could not finish his sentence as someone had just picked up the front of his van, deadlifting it. And that someone wasn't Gohan.
You were saying something?
Gohan smiled at Gine. Brief remained speechless for a moment, but regained his composure.
Welcome aboard then. It'll be nice not to travel alone.
And so, the three of them left the safety of Mount Palzu in order to find the mythical Dragon Balls. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that extra long What If tome. There will be many more parts to come in the future, but all that remains to be said is thank you so much for listening, and thank you for being with me to this point, 500,000 subscribers. I really thank you all a lot, and I hope you're with me for the next 500,000, and hey, who knows? Maybe we'll make it to 1 million, but in good time. Take care, everyone, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Catch you later.